I've been told that the 2DS XL is the definitive console in the 3DS line of handhelds. I'm not sure if it's because it's the last model that was released, or if people genuinely find this to be the very best way to play 3DS games. Let's take a step back and see why it's so highly regarded. The 3DS has had 6 console revisions. Let that sink in. There are 6 model variations. This console was keeping the boat afloat while its home console counterpart was not performing. This is why Nintendo changed and modified this console over and over. They were trying to make it fit every demographic they could. If they could sell more than 1 console per household, that would equal more than 1 home console sold. The 3DS has had a full lifetime. It debuted in 2011 and its final form is still being sold in stores. The original 3DS is a sleek, high-end feeling and looking system. Unarguably the most premium feeling out of all the 3DS versions. Some people don't like the glossy shell, but I'm all about it. The screen is small, but these games were initially designed to be played on a screen this size. They look fantastic on this size of screen. It's just a solid system, though it does have a few drawbacks. Some don't like the size of it. It's too small, they say. Also, to get the full 3D effect, your head has to stay still in a very small area. If you move slightly, you have double vision. I've also heard that people don't like the stylus placement. I'm fine with it. I don't really care where it's located on the console and I don't use it all that often anyway. Then there's the problem with the heavy upper screen. It's definitely more floppy than any of the other versions. Again, I don't mind the floppiness of the top screen and I don't play this while I'm running, but it is noticeable. It wasn't long until this model was added upon with a revision. It came as the 3DS XL. This model was very popular. I think most people were waiting to pick up a model that was larger with bigger screens. We all kind of thought this was coming down the pipeline because of the original DS line, which also had an XL version. I really like this model. The larger screens look great, and the start, select, and home buttons have all been changed for the better. The stylus has been moved to the right side, where most people were complaining that's where it should have been originally. Again, I don't mind where Nintendo places it. I don't really use the stylus anyway. Again, the 3D effect is exactly the same as the original model. If you move your head slightly out of its very narrow window area, it will not work. Nintendo decided to ignore the 3D issue with the 2DS. They got rid of the 3D. Now nobody could complain about the 3D not working. The design of the 2DS is very different compared to any of the DS models and the 2 previous 3DS models. It was aimed at people who wanted to play specific games that were only on the 3DS but didn't want to pay full price for one. Also, it was seen as the kid version of the 3DS. As the name implies, it doesn't play games in 3D, but it does play 3DS games. Are you confused yet? Well, get over it because we're just getting started with the confusion. Nintendo went back to the drawing board and realized that the 3DS needs 3D. It's part of the console's namesake. This is where the 3DS consoles broke off into 2 branches. The consoles that performed well and the older ones that took some getting used to. The next 3 models were revised versions of the original 3. They have been upgraded in every single way. They decided to release a new version of the 3DS that is similar in size to the original model, along with a similar sized model of the 3DS XL. These 2 systems have some fantastic upgrades. First off, the smaller versions have removable faceplates. This allows you to customize your console however you'd like. The US didn't receive many of these models, but there were a few you could grab. They also added a nub officially called the C-Stick. This remedied the need for this monstrosity. In the end, it works for what it's intended to do, and I'd rather have it than not at all. The biggest leap forward for these models is the 3D. It now has face tracking technology. You can finally play the games at ease and still get the benefit of using the 3D. What did they decide to call the new versions of the 3DS? Well, that's an easy one. They just called it new, as in new 3DS. The creativity was rolling when the meeting took place to decide what these would be called. I'm happy to know that even when these are 20 years old, we will still have to call them new. The new 3DS XL is basically a larger version of the new 3DS. It also has the C-Stick and the face tracking technology. However, it doesn't have the changeable faceplates. But it did get a number of very good limited editions I really like. This is the model I have used the most. I find the size of the console and the bigger screens to be the best way to play 3DS games. You also have a chance to get IPS displays on the new 3DS models, which is the best screen you can have on a 3DS system. But Nintendo wasn't done yet. Out of nowhere, Nintendo dropped a new 2DS. It's known as, you guessed it, the new 2DS XL. This thing was showered in glowing reviews. Some have gone so far as to say this is the definitive 3DS console. Definitive what? In what reality is the definitive way to play an entire catalog of games is to omit the very essence of what those games were programmed to do. There's no 3D feature on this model, meaning that the games that were programmed to be played in 3D won't display in 3D. The definitive 3DS is a 3DS without 3D. That's definitive, the very best way. Even if you can't stand the 3D effect, the new 3DS XL has the ability to play games without 3D. It gives you the options, meaning it's definitive in the way you can play the games. Also, what's going on with these speakers? Why in the world are they aimed down? Every other model has the speakers aimed right at your face, giving you optimal sound. Also, there's no chance of getting one of these with the IPS displays. Why is there a flap covering the game card slot? No other model has this, and I've never had a problem with dust getting in any of my other ones. I'm not exactly sure who Nintendo was aiming for when they released this console. Maybe they were targeting the cheapskates that didn't want to be too cheap and go with the original 2DS, but still wanted to have a higher end system. I don't know. I've picked a couple of these up. I will say they're comfortable, and I'm not worried about scratching them up. The matte finish is nice for hiding scratches and scuffs. The new 2DS XL is almost a new 3DS XL. It has all the features with a few revisions that a lot of people liked. As someone who has experience with every version of the 3DS family, I will say that the new 3DS XL is the best 3DS model. You get all the features with bigger screens that every other model has offered. If you want a more compact system, the new 3DS is also a very good model to pick up. If the new 2DS XL is the only option you have to play games, that's perfectly fine. I'd rather someone play with this model than not play a 3DS at all. If you have the option to get a new 3DS XL or a new 3DS, I'd say pick it up without hesitation, just as long as you're able to play the amazing catalog of 3DS games.